temperature stuff. You got heat injuries, you got cold injuries. You got stuff when it's hot, you got stuff when it's cold. Let's do cold first because we're in Canada and it's getting kind of cold outside. That works for me. So, with cold injuries, you have two major categories and a third kind of bonus. You've got hypothermia and you've got frostbite, and then the bonus thing you got is frozen state. Well, more on that later. Hypothermia is when your core body temperature, the inside of you, starts getting really cold. You're worried about the organs freezing, you slowing down, and really death. Hypothermia is more of a death problem. Then you have frostbite. Frostbite is a outside of the body. It's kind of like a freezer burn, getting burnt by the cold type of idea. The problem is the temperature is going too low and not too high. With frostbite, it's not really life-threatening generally, unless it's an area like the neck where breathing is going to be impacted. So hypothermia is generally the life-threatening one. Frostbite's generally not the life-threatening one. Okay, let's get into depth on hypothermia for a bit here. Hypothermia, 3 stages: mild, moderate, severe. Mild hypothermia is going to look like basic shivering. Look, if you've been cold before and you've gotten like the goosebumps and you've had mild hypothermia. It's not generally a big deal, but it's a sign that bad things could be coming if you don't control the person's temperature. So everyone, people in warm climates, you come out of the water and the wind hits you the wrong way, you get mild hypothermia. This should be normal. You should have ideally felt this at some point in your life, just as a point of reference. Moderate hypothermia. That's when the shivering starts getting violent. So they start really shaking. They start really shaking a lot. In addition to that, decision making can kind of get impacted. So the person starts shaking, and then they start making weird decisions, or they start acting kind of odd. They can appear drunken-like, so often they'll call this a drunken-like state. So if you've ever seen someone who's intoxicated with alcohol, they can look very similar to someone with moderate hypothermia. Well, frankly, in addition to that, because of just the way the body works, when the body gets really cold, it's going to restrict the blood vessels on the outside of the body, and it's going to basically let the skin start freezing to maintain your core body temperature. It's going to try to make it so the inside doesn't freeze. When it starts failing, it's going to open up all those blood vessels and those capillaries, and the core body temperature is going to rush to the outside. So what will actually sometimes happen is your skin will start feeling hot or warm, even though you're freezing, because the inside of your body is now warming the outside. So you have somebody who's shaking a lot, they feel like they're overheating, even though they're freezing, and they're making bad decisions. People with moderate hypothermia will, in some cases, rip off all their clothes, go naked, and then jump in the snowbank because they think they're overheating and then die. So this is not immediately, right? But the point is that they make very, very bad decisions. And this is a bit of an add-in here with moderate hypothermia. You may have heard that drinking alcohol warms you up. It does not. What alcohol does, it's one of the many things that dilates your blood vessels. It opens them up. So because it opens them up, it kind of induces or starts or helps along more severe or worsening hypothermia. So if you drink alcohol, it can make your decision making worse. It can impede decision making. It's going to open your blood vessels, which is going to cool your inside, which is what you don't want. And look, you're making bad decisions because you're freezing, and you're making bad decisions because you're on alcohol, and now your core body temperature is leaving you because you're freezing and because of the alcohol. It's like two of the same thing. All the time in cold climates, cold countries, someone gets really, really cold, they try to drink it off, and then you find them in the spring in the now melted snowbank. Like, it just do not, that's a myth. Do not drink alcohol for freezing to death. Very bad idea. Just don't do it. Okay. Severe hypothermia. With severe hypothermia, the person stops shivering. The person goes unconscious. The body has failed. The body is failing. If you've ever watched a movie about climbing a mountain, or like climbing Mount Everest or something, there's often a scene where the person gets really, really cold and just tries to drift off. That is an example of severe hypothermia. One of the trickiest things to deal with casualties that have severe hypothermia is they're trying to sleep. And you really, really, really don't want them to go to sleep. Because if they go to sleep, they might not be waking up. So it's a bit tricky. I'll get into rewarming and how you deal with this in a second, but just keep in mind the person's probably not shivering. The body was trying to shiver before to generate heat, but it can't do that anymore. And they're probably going unconscious and just trying to drift off. And good luck, it's pretty difficult to deal with that type of person. Okay, what do you do? So how do you deal with hypothermia? What's kind of the first aid for it? All of this stuff is going to be rewarming. So you're trying to get the body temperature back up. When you're doing that, there's a few caveats. There's a few things to consider. The first, you can't rewarm somebody too fast, because if you do, that can cause shock and create other issues. So you can't just throw somebody in a fireplace. Like, you can't just throw somebody in fire. You can't just light people on fire. That's not going to work. Generally speaking, the temperature that is recommended for this sort of thing is about room temperature or just above. So the human body heat technically would be like the best thing to do. So the first aid for this a long time ago was just get naked with somebody in a sleeping bag and hold them, and then you have body to body heat and that. But for multiple obvious reasons, I assume to most of you, we don't really teach that anymore. But the point is the same. So if you have, look, if this is like a family member, and like if this is your spouse or something, and they're freezing, naked in sleeping bag, why not? If not, look, you can wrap people in blankets, you can find heating sources, get them to a warm, well-heated room. Okay, that's basically what you're looking for. If you're alone in a forest or something, and you've got to transport people, well, then we got to get inventive. So there's a few things to consider with that. First, if someone is wet, they're going to lose body heat way faster than if they're not. So you may have remembered in other sections of this, we talked about water, heat transfer rates, how often it puts heat on, takes heat off. This is the takes heat off problem, and it's working against you. So if someone's submerged in water, they're under the ground, they're under a frozen lake or something, and then you pull them out of the lake, and you somehow don't go under the lake with them, and you find a way where that is safe. Sure, that's figured out. They are now completely drenching wet, and they're losing heat incredibly fast. I think the last math on this was like 25 times as fast or something than when they're dry. It is incredible how quickly they lose body heat. So you need to dry them, but you're in a forest and it's windy, and by the time you take their wet clothes off of them to put dry ones on, because you have dry clothes somehow, they just, naked, cold air hits them and they're gone. Like it can get kind of impractical. So if you're going to kind of deal with all that, one, make sure you've got dry clothes. Two, ideally make sure you've got some sort of wind barrier, so like a towel or a tarp or a giant piece of cloth or a tent or something. So make sure that you've got something to block wind while the clothes are changed, and in general, stuff to dry them off with as best you can, just to get those clothes off them. If that doesn't work, if you can't do that, just put the dry clothes over the wet clothes, and then hopefully the dry clothes soak up some of the water out, and they're drier on the inside, and then good luck. That's pretty much what you got to do. In addition to that, let's talk about how you get cold. So there's 4 main ways that describe how you get cold, so you can kind of understand the mechanism, like how this works. The first is convection. So convection is like the air barrier that's around you. When air that's warm around you is swapped out for cold air, the temperature is convected away. This is a transfer of temperature through replacing what was kind of heating you up, the air layer around you, with now what's cooling you down, the cold air layer. So air transfers the first. Second is conduction. So thing touches thing, and then thing transfers heat to other thing. So if this hand was cold and this hand was hot, this hand touching this hand, the heat from this hand would transfer into this hand. It would conduct to it. Conduction is what happens when someone's submerged in water. So if water is all around you and it's touching you everywhere, the water is going to conduct the heat away from your body. There's that one. The third one is breathing. So when you breathe in and you breathe out, you have hot or cold or whatever air entering your lungs, and your body heat is going to press against with that. It's going to interact with that. It's kind of like conduction internally. That's basically the idea. So you're going to lose or gain heat based on the temperature of the air that you breathe in. That's the third. And then the fourth would be evaporation. So if you're sweating or if water evaporates off of you, because it's water that's on you, it's going to absorb body heat or whatever, and then it's going to evaporate that away, and whatever heat was in that water has now left. One of the reasons why sweating is done when you're overheating is because the body is trying to drop body temperature. So the body recognizes you're overheating, you're having a bad time. It wants to drop your body temperature so that you don't have any sort of problem. So you sweat, it creates water on the surface and goes, okay, take my heat and evaporate away. That's the mechanism of sweating. That's part of it. The other thing is it's creating a layer of water around you to try to help with the conduction and some convection stuff. And it's doing a bunch of different things with that water to help get that heat off of you. Sweating is actually a really, really interesting phenomenon. Most animals don't actually sweat. I think humans, Homo sapiens, are some of the only ones that do. Because like dogs don't sweat. They try to get rid of their heat by putting their tongue out and then breathing heavily, right? Most animals don't. So it's water and evaporation and temperature control and all this is really interesting stuff. Anyways, that is in principle everything that you really need to know for the basics of hypothermia. Get them warm, not too fast. If you're alone in a forest and taking somebody out of water, it can be tricky. Once again, you can get hypothermia in the middle of the hot summer. Water cools you down real quick, so it can happen. Okay, frostbite. With frostbite, the skin is the major issue, or the tissue around the skin. Think about it like burns. It's a lot like burns. You've got two kind of depths. You've got superficial and you've got deep. So superficial frostbite is just kind of like the edge of the skin. It's kind of like the first degree burn. Skin's going to be white and waxy, or it's going to be, if you have a darker skin tone, it'll be more grayish and waxy. You're looking for the same sort of colors, kind of, as what you'd see if someone was in shock. So the skin's changing color. There's a lack of blood flow getting to it because it's getting frozen, and it's getting that, it's like a candle. It's waxy, kind of like a candle. There aren't many things in medicine that I can think of that make your skin waxy. Waxy is kind of special. So the waxy thing helps a lot. Okay, that's how to tell if someone's superficially frostbite, basically, skin white, waxy. If someone has deep frostbite, so we're talking potentially frozen all the way to the bone, to potentially all of the tissues in the skin, the skin's going to be dying, potentially. It's going to look like it. So you could have skin is turning black, skin is looking necrotic, skin, if you've ever seen freezer burn on a piece of meat that you've taken out of the freezer, deep frostbite. That's the type of idea. So if you have that, the skin won't necessarily be white and waxy. It will probably be hard. You're talking like if you have a frozen arm from like the wrist up to the hand or whatever, you have a frozen wrist. It is so rigid and potentially so brittle. If you move that hand, it might just snap off. So you really don't want to be moving deep frostbite around, and you don't necessarily want to be like rubbing superficial frostbite vigorously, because the skin can just peel. Where the connective tissue of whatever is frozen in you is not connecting so well. So you don't want to move it. It might be gone. Yeah, okay. First aid in general for both. You're once again, just like hypothermia, you're rewarming, but there's a difference. Rewarming with frostbite involves rewarming one time. It's still something you want to do progressively or slowly, but you only want to do it once. So where hypothermia, you'd want to rewarm as early as possible. With frostbite, you want to only rewarm one time. Why? The best way I've found to explain this is by referencing storing meat in a freezer. So if you aren't somebody that eats meat, I apologize. This will probably not be as useful of an analogy, but the same thing in principle would happen with vegetables if you froze them. Imagine that you have food in the freezer and it's frozen, and you take it out and you thaw it, and then you put it in the freezer again, and then you thaw it, and then you put it in the freezer again, and then you thaw it. What happens each time you keep thawing and freezing and thawing and freezing the food? It tastes like garbage. It tastes horrendous because the tissue in the food is being permanently damaged. It's being just damaged and damaged and damaged over time. Now imagine if you did this, you froze and rethawed food 5 times in a week versus just leaving it frozen for the entire week. Which food tastes better? Same basic idea. Same basic idea with frostbite. If you rewarm it, you rewarm it 1 time, or you taste really bad. No, well, you would, but but I don't really ascribe to cannibalism. So the basic idea here is connective tissue permanently damaged. You have connective tissue; it gets permanently damaged. Blood flow to the area with frostbite might be permanently worse for the rest of your life if you keep doing this. You want to rewarm once again 1 time. How do we do that? How was that handled? Water, once again, frankly, in first aid is what you generally use. So you want to submerge a frostbitten area in hotter side of warm water. You don't want to put it in scalding water or in really, really, really hot water, because what will happen is the tissue on the skin, the outside of you will thaw first, the inside will thaw second, and the skin that is now thawed will go, blood, I need blood, give me blood, and the blood underneath is frozen solid, so it just dies. So imagine you're once again thawing it. This really, for people who thaw out a lot of frozen meat or frozen fish or something, this is going to make a lot of sense. When you're thawing out frozen food like this, think about how you thaw that out when you want to eat it later. It's slow and progressively, so that the whole thing can thaw out at the same time. You don't want it to thaw. What happens when you just throw something in the oven, like just it's frozen, you throw it in, versus a slow and careful thawing process. It's the same type of idea. Now with food, you will often thaw it in like cool water, and it takes a long time. We're not doing that here. We're doing it a bit faster than that. But don't just scald it. Don't just heat it up way too fast. That's not a good idea. Okay, another visual aid that might help with this, if you've ever seen any of those holiday carols or holiday tales where the person's, in colder countries especially, where someone's in the chair and they have their blanket and their hot cup of cocoa, and they're not in the fireplace, and their feet are in like a tub, like a basin of water, because their toesies are frozen. That's basically like an all-in combo of hypothermia and frostbite first aid put together in a nice, happy holiday package, okay? That's the kind of, so have that kind of visualization, and it might guide you through this. One of the best things you could do, really, if you have access to it, if you want to, if someone has frostbite in a bunch of places, is you could just go into a bathtub, get it to a hotter side of warm, and then have the water drain slowly while introducing new water, so that when the cold water leaves, the new warmer to hot water can replace it, so you can have the same consistent temperature of water the whole time. That'd be great. I mean, that's a lot of water. That's, for some people, that's a water bill. Fair enough. Well, you're having a first aid emergency, so really, who cares about the water bill? But still, depending on how much water you have access to, that might be practical or not. Figure it out as best you can. That's basically frostbite. Remember in the beginning, one of the first parts of this whole thing, we talked about preserve life, prevent further injury, promote recovery. So the importance of focusing on the life first. Hypothermia is the life-threatening thing. Frostbite is the further injury generally thing. Hypothermia, you want to rewarm quickly. Frostbite, you want to rewarm once. With that in mind, if you have both, which, look, if it's really cold outside and you're dealing with that, very possibly could. Okay, you rewarm as soon as possible to deal with the hypothermia because their life's in danger. And then you end up probably accidentally thawing the frostbite. And then they taste really bad. Darn. They're alive, and they taste horrendous. At least the cannibals aren't as interested. Yeah, that's pretty, I mean, I was going to say on a more serious note, but that's pretty much it. Like that's pretty much what is more relevant. Look, if they're dead, it doesn't matter if their tissue is good. You start rewarming process immediately because dying from hypothermia just isn't worth it. That's basically that little one. That should be everything. Now it's on to frozen.